almost every year there's a black person that dies from police brutality here, and we don't hear about it because Canada is so nice that, oh my God, why would that happen in Canada?
Right.
That they don't want to have those conversations here. They don't want to have any conversations about the past because it makes them uncomfortable. My problem here is that it's really hard to fit in, even if you're born here.
Welcome back to Ivaintures. Today we continue the conversation, the other part of Canada you don't hear about. My guest is Rito Joseph. Rito provides tours on the often ignored Afro history in Canada. Due to his vast knowledge, he's often invited as a guest speaker at various universities. And it's a great pleasure to sit down with him again today to continue this conversation, the other side of Canada you don't hear about. What's your relationship like with the police here?
There's a lot of...
Hopefully you don't have to deal with them so often, but I'm just curious. Compared to like what you see on the news between black people generally.
I mean, I'm a regular black person, so I'm never gonna say I don't have to deal with them.
Yeah.
There's a lot of police harassment here, police brutality. Police kill black people here too.
That's something that we don't hear much about.
No, man. They killed one last year. They killed one the year before. Yep. Almost every year there's a black person that dies from police brutality here, and we don't hear about it because Canada is so nice that, oh my God, why would that happen in Canada?
Right.
Bro, what are you doing? What are you doing?
This video was taken a year ago.
Off of him.
An oversight body cleared this police officer's use of force, and 3 years ago it cited an earlier coroner's inquest recommendation to reinforce through regular and refresher training the risk of death associated with the use of neck restraint techniques.
Understanding that Canada is British North America.
Yeah.
Canada is just the 13 colonies that are not independent.
Yes.
You see what I'm saying? That's Canada.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, a lot of police brutality happened here. And I say a lot. People are gonna say, but in comparison to the States, I'm not here to compare because first of all, we're only a population of 33 to 35 million people here. So it's not to compare the amount of numbers, it's to compare the thought process and the actions.
Yes.
And in that sense, we can say that this is something that most black people go through here. And yeah, depending on the car that you drive, depending on your postal code, depending on where you live, depending on what you do for a living, yeah.
Yeah.
Mais qu'est-ce qu'il a fait? Yo, pourquoi tu restes comme toi? Yo, qu'est-ce que tu fais? What are you doing? Yo, calme-toi avec lui. Calme-toi avec lui. Yo, what the f are you doing? Are you stupid? Does that make sense? Ça fait du sens? Ça fait du sens? Crétin, ça fait du sens?
If you had a choice, would you still be here in Canada if you were not born here? Like, do you like Canada?
I mean, I call it home, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, I think it's nice between May and August specifically. I think it's really nice.
Yeah.
Would I be here if I wasn't born here? I don't know. To be honest with you, I don't know because maybe not. You know, I know my parents came here for like a better opportunity back home.
Yeah.
So, you know, I can't deny that. But, I mean, this is... My problem here is that it's really hard to fit in, even if you're born here.
It's hard to fit in.
Yes.
Tell me more.
Because the whole conversation in Quebec is about cultural identity. And for them, the cultural identity, this conversation that they want to have is mostly about their ancestors.
Yes.
And their legacy.
Yeah.
And it's just really hard to establish yourself within that conversation when you know what took place here, when you know what happened, when you know about the history, and when you know that they don't want to have those conversations here. They don't want to have any conversations about the past because it makes them uncomfortable. So either they haven't healed from their own trauma, or yeah, it's really it's not an easy conversation to have. It's a lot of layers in terms of cultural identity here.
Yeah.
That's why it's such an international city as well.
Right.
You know, this was a place where, you know, black activism took place. This was a place where community organizing took place. This was a place where, you know, black entrepreneurship took place. So really, you know, the foundation for this the community to try and thrive.
Right.
You know, in the midst of, you know, going through racial segregation, discrimination.
What is one thing that you think is important that people may not be familiar with if they're thinking about immigrating here? I know Canada is just that place, you know. People love Canada, you know. So I know somebody's watching this and is thinking, I want to move to Canada. So what is one thing you can tell them about here?
Listen, you can move
Good
to
and bad.
Canada. Listen, if you come here, it's free healthcare. You might wait for 46 hours. Maybe you might even wait 18 hours, but it's free.
Well, you pay for it through your taxes somehow.
Yes, definitely. So it's not free as an overstatement.
Right.
You pay your taxes, so they take it from your, you know, anything you buy.
Yes.
Any check you receive.
Yeah.
But the quality of life, I would say, is somewhat better than that of the United States.
Yeah.
That I definitely want to say, having lived in the States as well.
Yeah. Where'd you live?
I live in Brooklyn.
Brooklyn, okay.
Yeah, I live in Brooklyn, East Flatbush.
Yeah.
The quality of life, you have, I would say it's kind of easier to preserve yourself here than, you know, but at the same time, living in New York is really fast-paced. It's a different type of living. But if you want to move to Quebec, Montreal, or, you know, the province of Quebec, try and learn a little bit of French.
You were talking about the law that was recently passed.
Bill 96.
Yeah, what does that do exactly?
It has to they made it mandatory for people that if you go to social services, you want to have social services.
Yeah.
It has to be in French. So let's say you've been waiting, I don't know, for like 6 hours.
Yeah.
And you're on the verge of dying. At least you speak French.
Yeah.
So we're writing French on your tombstone.
Yeah.
Let me stop.
No, that's good.
We are still in the middle of trying to save our culture and language from all the assimilation and residential schools that you put my people through. Please, we understand your culture is in danger, but so is ours.
All right. Yeah, no, that's very interesting.
Very interesting.
They're trying to preserve the French culture.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. And you know, how do you feel about that, man? I think it's unique too because in a way, it makes Canada special. What I think is funny is people say Canada is a bilingual country. I don't really think it is. Canada is an English-speaking country with some French people in Quebec. Because I mean, this is a very small province compared to, you know, the rest of Canada is pretty big. You know, so it's only this portion here. Because once you leave this area, nobody speaks French.
Yeah.
In Toronto and, you know, Vancouver.
So let me tell you a little bit about that. It's really interesting. The term Canadians was once referred only to French-speaking people here. And then everyone started calling themselves Canadian, so they start calling themselves French Canadians. And since the 60s, the French Canadians from the province of Quebec call themselves Québécois. Because they were the first European settlers here. So anything we know, like the country known as Canada, it was started by French people. It used to be the colony of New France.
Okay.
So this is why they hold on to the French language. But you said something really important in terms of Canada being an English country. It's true.
Yeah.
But you do have pockets of French Canadian settlements in different provinces. The reason why we don't hear about them is because nowadays, if you're a French-speaking person, people assume you're from Quebec, which is not always the case. But this linguistic conversation stems from colonization. It's about who lost the big piece of land in the New World, quote unquote. And the French feel like that's what they lost in 1759, the Battle of the Plains of Abraham. And nowadays, this has been a whole conversation to preserve this language because they've been conquered and dominated by the English for the past 200-300 years. However, life is not as simple. Being Haitian, knowing my Haitian history, I know that French is a colonial language. So I'm not gonna go to war for the French language as I'm not gonna go to war for the English language.
Yes.
For me, they're colonial languages, and I live in Western society, so I need to know a few Western language if I want to make it, or if I want to move forward. Until I find myself and I don't need to speak these languages anymore. But here, the conversation now, it's about preserving the culture, which is based on the language, which comes from clerical education, clergy, the education received from the Catholic Church throughout the centuries. And this is not my fight per se to preserve the fight for the Catholic Church, nor is it my fight to preserve the French language, nor am I trying to preserve English language. I just think that in this day and age, knowing more than one language is always...
It's a plus, right?
It's a plus. You know, if you want to travel, go to different places, have more opportunities, if you want to meet different type of people, different ways of thinking, different ideology, different value system, it's always a blessing to learn a new language.
Right.
So I'm not going to try and restrain myself to one language because the province where I live feel like that's the only way to go.
Right. Makes sense. Makes sense. Now to conclude this, in terms of housing, you know, it's common in the U.S. that, you know, people are basically still segregated. If you go to Chicago, there are sections that are heavily black. Same thing in Baltimore. Same thing in Washington, D.C. America remains, in major cities like that, still quite segregated. Not to say you can't move in those sections, it's just most people who are black live in certain areas. Is it the same experience here? Because from my experience, and I don't live here, it's different visiting, it seems like things are fairly spread out. It's like there's no black neighborhood per se.
Yes and no.
Okay.
Things are spread out, but you have certain pockets of black communities throughout the city or the island of Montreal. If you go out east, I'm from out east. I grew up in Saint-Michel. This is where you found a major part of the Haitian community. Saint-Michel, Montreal North, RDP, Saint-Léonard, Villeray, Ansic. You'd also find continental Africans. If you go uptown Côte d'Ivoire, you'll find a lot of Caribbean people from all over the Caribbean, a lot of African people, a lot of Middle Eastern, a lot of Indians, Greeks, melting pot, really. If you go out west, you find a lot of Caribbean people as well, Africans, continental. Out east too, you find continentals. The neighborhood that was once known as a black ghetto would be Little Burgundy, which is no longer that. Has been gentrified since the 60s, really the 80s and 90s. Now you would find certain pockets in certain neighborhoods, but you don't have one neighborhood that's a black neighborhood.
Okay.
But you would have certain neighborhoods that are known to have black people, so they're considered, you know, black hanging spots, right? And but only when it's the time to talk about bad things, though. Most of the time. Other than that, if you go to certain neighborhoods, you will find, you know, black community established, and black people are very present here in Montreal. We're just not really mainstream like that. You know, and it's kind of hard to explain because if you walk around downtown, you'd see a few black people here and there, but not as much as if you go to certain neighborhoods. But as a tourist, it'd be hard for you to go to certain neighborhoods, to go to Côte d'Ivoire, go to LaSalle. You know, it'd be hard for you to go to Montreal North. It'd be hard for you to just make it in those neighborhoods, not because you don't want to or because you don't know how to. You wouldn't know what to go do out there. You know, and this is also how the city is a bit segregated in that sense, but not in terms of race, more in terms of social status.
Okay.
But we know that social status also has to do with your ethnic background. So, you know, it's a lot of layers here.
Okay.
Which is what makes it different from the States in a lot of ways, even though I like to say it's not the same. It's still North America, but there are a few specificities of, you know, Montreal. Is that a word?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So
It is. Okay. Very interesting. Very interesting. So, all right. That's cool. If anyone has any questions, what's your Instagram so they can follow up?
My Instagram is RJ underscore CHAM. RJ underscore CHAM. And if you want to follow what I do, what I post on my page. I'll have another page, Black Montreal Experiences. And or you can go on my website, www.ritojoseph.com.
Okay.
Or www.blackmontrealexperiences, all in one word, .com.
Thank you so much for your time today, bro.
Bless, man. Thanks for having me, man. Keep doing your thing, man.
Absolutely, I'm
You
trying.
guys go
man.
check out this page too.
Thank
Nice
you.
work.
Thank you so much.
Bless.
So guys, I hope you enjoyed this. So many things to talk about. Can't cover it all. So if you want to continue the conversation, or if you're curious about, you know, living in Canada in general and anything specific in Montreal, this is your guy. I'm going to put his information below on the description. So make sure you check that out. If you like what you saw, please press the like button, subscribe, and I will see you in the next video.